Rust smelled different in zero gravity. Daniel Ward had always thought so. It still smelled like rust, but it floated on the air longer, like a stubborn ghost. He breathed in deep and grinned. He loved scrapyards. Other men loved cities. He loved places where broken things waited to be fixed. The orbital scrapyard above Halmira was the biggest he had ever seen. Twisted ship hulls hung in slow circles around a small, artificial sun. Dealers shouted from 100 floating stalls. For armed merchants haggled with one-eyed pilots. Somewhere a cutting torch threw blue sparks into the dark. Daniel walked through it all with his hands in his coat pockets. He was 32 years old, average height, brown hair that needed a trim, and a calm face that most people read wrong. They thought he was bored. He was just paying attention. His ship, the Blue Hen, was docked at Bay 19. Inside her was a Draven freighter captain who had paid Daniel half up front to find one very specific part. AK-class resonance coil. Rare. Old. The freighter would not fly without it. Daniel reached stall 42. The merchant there had 4 arms, 3 eyes, and a smile full of teeth that did not match each other. Heard you have AK-class coil, Daniel said. Maybe, the merchant said. 5,000 credits. 3. 4. 3.5. And I do not tell the harbor master about the stolen Varan plates behind you. The merchant blinked all 3 eyes at the same time. He sighed. 3.5. Daniel reached for his card. Behind him, soft boots stopped on the metal floor. I will pay 10,000, a woman's voice said. The merchant's eyes snapped up. His forearms began to move before his brain did. Daniel turned slowly. She wore a long dark hood. Only her mouth and chin showed. Her voice was steady but young. Behind her stood a tall figure in black armor, hand resting on the handle of a curved blade. The bodyguard's eyes never left Daniel. I was here first, Daniel said. His voice did not rise. I am paying more, the hooded woman said. You are paying him to forget I was here first. That is a different thing. The merchant looked from one to the other. Greed was winning. Daniel could see it on his face. Daniel turned fully toward the woman. He did not look at the bodyguard. That bothered the bodyguard. He could tell. Push back your hood, Daniel said. Excuse me. If you want to outbid me, do it with your face. That is the rule of the scrapyard. Faces, not hoods. It was not a rule. He had just made it up. But the merchant nodded solemnly as if it had been written somewhere holy. The woman hesitated. Then she pushed back her hood. Bright violet eyes. Soft round cheeks. Pale hair tied back in a quick knot. And on her temples, faint but clear, the royal markings of House Valen. Daniel had heard of the royal family. He had never bothered to memorize their faces. He only knew the markings because every Solari noble wore them, and every noble owed money to some mechanic somewhere. You are noble, Daniel said. Yes. Which house? The bodyguard moved one step forward. The woman lifted a hand without looking back, and the bodyguard stopped. Valen, she said. Daniel thought for a moment. He had heard that name. He could not place it. He shrugged. Well, Lady Valen, the coil is mine. I have a freighter to fix tonight. You can have the next one that comes in. Should be 3 weeks. He turned to pay the merchant. Wait. He turned back. She was looking at his hands. Not his face. His hands. The grease under the nails. The small burn on the back of his thumb. The way his fingers held the credit card like they held a wrench more often. You are a mechanic, she said. It was not a question. I am. A good one. The Draven freighter captain who hired me thinks so. He has bad taste in food but good taste in mechanics. A small smile touched her mouth. It surprised her, he could tell. She seemed unused to her own smile. I have a job, she said. A ship. Almost finished. I need someone who can help me complete it in 28 days. I will pay in Solari gold. No. The word came out before he had thought about it. He had a rule. No royal contracts. Nobles paid late. Nobles changed their minds. Nobles cried in court when the bill came. Royal contracts ended careers. The bodyguard looked relieved. The woman did not show that she was hurt. But Daniel saw it anyway. A small flicker at the corner of her eye. She nodded once, polite, and turned to leave. Wait. Now it was his turn to stop her. She turned back slowly. Your hands, Daniel said. She looked down at them. She had forgotten to hide them. Black at the knuckles. A small healed cut on the side of one thumb. Calluses where calluses did not belong on a princess. You work on the ship yourself? Daniel said. Yes. You built it. Most of it. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. The merchant watched them both like he was watching a play. I have never met a noble with mechanic's hands, Daniel said. I would like to know why. I have never met a human who said no to gold, she answered. Then we are both rare. He paid for the coil. He handed it to her. Take this, he said. Show me your ship tonight. If it is real work, I will stay. If it is royal nonsense, I leave. Deal. The bodyguard made a sound like a growl. The princess smiled again. Deal. She put up her hood and walked away. Daniel watched her go. He had a feeling his Draven freighter would have to wait. There were no laughing voices in the secret hangar. That was the first thing Daniel Ward noticed. After 2 days in the noisy scrapyard, the silence in this place felt almost holy. The second thing he noticed was the ship. It sat under 3 soft white lamps in the middle of the hangar floor. Long and sharp, with curved wings folded against its sides like a sleeping bird. The hull was unpainted. Tools lay scattered on the floor around it. Cables hung from the open belly like loose veins. Someone had been working on this ship for a very long time, and that someone had been working alone. Daniel walked around it once. He bent down. He looked under the wing. He stood up and looked at Princess Eurovalen. This is not royal work, he said. No. No. Royal engineers use clean lines and stupid paint. This is real work. Whoever built this loves engines more than crowns. Yura's cheeks went a little pink. She turned away quickly and pretended to check a panel. Where do we begin? She asked. With coffee, Daniel said. What is coffee? He stared at her. What is coffee? She asked me what is coffee. That was how it started. For the next 2 weeks, Daniel and Euro worked in the hangar from sunset to sunrise. She had a tea called Spice Root that she swore was better than anything in the galaxy. He brought a small black grinder from the Blue Hen and made coffee on a hot plate. They fought about which was better every single morning. Euro won the third argument by drinking 3 full cups of his coffee in one sitting and declaring herself the expert. Captain Risha, the silent bodyguard, watched all of this from a chair near the door. She did not speak. She did not move. Her hand stayed on her blade for the first 3 days. On the 4th day, she got tired and let her hand rest on her knee. By the 7th day, she was reading an old book. Daniel and Euro worked. He learned that she knew more about Krellite resonance drives than he did. He learned that her hands were faster than his on a coupling. He learned that she had been studying xenoengineering in secret since she was 12 years old, hiding books under her royal pillow because her tutors said princesses should not study machines. She learned that he hated the word sir. She learned that he hummed old Earth songs without knowing he was humming them. She learned that when he was thinking hard, he tapped his thumb against his belt 3 times in a row, then stopped. She also learned that he never, not once, mentioned her body. That was the strangest thing of all. Every other person in her life had a comment ready. Stylists, cousins, servants, even kind old generals who meant well. Some hinted softly. Some joked openly. Some only looked, which was worse. Daniel did not hint. Daniel did not joke. Daniel did not look. He looked at her hands when she worked. He looked at her eyes when she spoke. He looked at the engine when he was thinking. The rest of her, to him, seemed to simply be her. On the 10th night, it happened. Yura had stepped out of the hangar for a moment to take a message from her father's chamberlain. Daniel was inside, tightening a panel. The chamberlain's voice carried through the half-open door. A second voice joined it. A young servant. She still works on that thing, the servant whispered. The fat princess and her toy ship. Hush. She can hear. Let her hear. Half the palace says the same. The 2 voices walked away. Daniel stayed very still. Yura walked back into the hangar a moment later. Her face was a careful, polite mask. She picked up her wrench. She did not look at him. He set down his tool. Sit, he said. I am working. Sit. Please. She sat slowly on a crate. He sat across from her on the floor, cross-legged, like a boy. He waited. He did not speak. He had learned, in 32 years of fixing things, that the loudest sound in any room is a patient man's silence. After a long time, she spoke. They call me the Fat Princess. You have heard it now. I have. My cousin Varen made the name. It spread to every court in the sector. Now children say it in markets. Now ambassadors smile when they say it. Now my own father looks at me and sees the name before he sees his daughter. She stopped. She breathed. It is not about my body. Not really. It is about being told, every single day, that there is one reason I will never be enough. One. And no matter what I learn, or build, or do, that one reason stays. They will laugh at this ship too, when they see it. They will say the fat princess made a toy. Even if it flies, they will laugh. That is the part that hurts. Not the word. The forever of it. Daniel listened. He did not interrupt. When she was finished, he picked up a small bolt from the floor and held it between his fingers. On Earth, he said quietly, we judge engines by how they run, not how they shine. We have 1,000 kinds of ships and 1,000 kinds of people, and the only ones worth a damn are the ones that work. Pretty does not fly. Pretty does not haul. Pretty does not bring you home in a storm. He set the bolt down. You are an engine that runs. That is the only thing I see. The rest is paint. He picked up his wrench and went back to work. Yura sat on the crate. She did not move for a long time. Her shoulders began to shake. She covered her face with her greasy hands. She cried, quietly, the way she had not allowed herself to cry in years. In the doorway, Captain Risha looked at the human mechanic for a long moment. For the first time in 10 years, she took her hand off her blade. 3 weeks of work had turned a half-built skeleton into something almost alive. The ship in the hangar now had skin. Smooth dark plating covered every panel. Its long wings were folded tight. Its engine bay was sealed. A single name was painted in silver letters along its side, in Yura's own steady handwriting. Hearthcoal. It was an old word in the Solari tongue. It meant the last red ember in a dead fire, the one that could still light a whole village if someone bothered to find it. Daniel Ward stepped back from the engine bay and wiped his hands on a rag. He looked at Yura. Yura looked at the ship. Captain Risha looked at both of them and pretended she was not smiling under her hood. Final coupling is in, Daniel said. Drive is sealed. She is ready. Yura did not answer at first. She walked to the side of the ship and pressed her palm flat against the painted name. The metal was warm under her hand. 2 years of work. 2 years of stolen nights. 2 years of hidden books. She felt the weight of it lift off her chest like a held breath. Then she did something she had not planned. She turned and kissed Daniel on the cheek. It was quick. It was nothing. It was everything. Her face went bright red the moment she pulled back. She spun on her heel and stared very seriously at a wall panel that she had checked 9 times already. I was, reading the pressure gauge, she said. That is the wall, Daniel said. It is a special gauge. Of course. From a small speaker on the workbench, the dry voice of Azair, the Blue Hen's AI assistant, spoke up. Sir, the princess's heart rate just doubled. Yours also rose. Would you both like a medical scan? Mute, Azair. Just trying to help, sir. Mute. The speaker clicked off. Risha, in the doorway, coughed once into her hand. It might have been a laugh. That night, Daniel slept on a small cot near the workbench. He always did now. Yura had gone back to the palace for an official dinner she could not avoid. The hangar was dark except for one low lamp. The hearthcoal sat quietly in the middle of the floor. The blast came at 2:47 in the morning. Daniel woke to a roar like a giant slamming its fist into the ground. The hangar shook. A wave of heat hit his face. He rolled off the cot and hit the floor as a piece of metal flew past his head and stuck into the wall behind him. Fire. There was fire everywhere. The whole engine bay of the hearthcoal was burning. Daniel did not stop to think. He stood up, coughing, and ran straight at the door. He kicked it open. Yura was running across the courtyard outside, still in her dinner dress, Risha 3 steps behind her. Yura's face was white with fear. The ship, she gasped. Stay back, Daniel said. She did not stay back. She ran past him into the hangar. Yura. He went after her. Inside, the smoke was thick. The drive assembly was a melted ruin. Yura stood in the middle of it, staring, her hands hanging at her sides. A burning panel above her cracked loose. Daniel saw it fall before she did. He grabbed her around the waist and yanked her back. The panel hit the floor where she had been standing. A burst of sparks jumped onto his sleeve. He felt the burn before he heard her cry out. Risha pulled them both outside. She slammed the hangar door shut and hit the fire system. White foam rushed into the hangar through the ceiling jets. Daniel sat in the courtyard, his arm red and raw, his ears ringing. Yura sat next to him. She was shaking. My arm is fine, he said, before she could ask. It is not fine. It is burned. It is fine. Risha was already on her comm, calling palace medics. She found the small black device under what was left of the floor plates 20 minutes later. A charge. Solari military design. Set with a delay timer. Whoever had placed it had palace access and had wanted to make sure Yura was inside when it went off. The trail led, quietly, through 3 servants and 1 steward, back to Lord Varen. In the morning, Yura went to her father. The Emperor sat at his long stone desk and listened. He looked at the burned piece of the charge on his desk. He looked at his daughter's tired eyes. He sighed in the way old men sigh when they are choosing peace over justice. I cannot move against him publicly, he said. Not before the trial. The scandal would shake the throne. He tried to kill me, father. He tried to stop you from racing. There is a difference, in law, if not in heart. Withdraw, Yura. Please. There is no shame in living. Yura walked out without answering. In the hangar that afternoon, she sat on the scorched floor with her knees pulled up. 11 days until the trial of worlds. The drive was destroyed. The coil was cracked. Half the wiring was melted. Even if she worked without sleep, she could not rebuild it in time. Not alone. Let him win, she whispered. Let the Empire have its perfect air. I am tired. Daniel sat down on the floor in front of her. His arm was wrapped in white cloth. He did not look angry. He looked very calm. That was somehow worse. I have fixed engines that everyone called dead, he said. I have fixed ships that were already on fire when they came to me. Fixing things is what we do. Not because we are strong. Because we are stubborn. She did not look up. I came out here for a coil, he said. I found a person worth being stubborn for. So I am being stubborn. You can quit if you want. I am going to fix this ship. He stood up, embarrassed by his own words, and walked off to find a wrench. Yura sat on the floor for 1 more minute. Then she stood up. She wiped her face. She tied back her hair. Pass me the spanner, she said. They got back to work. 42 ships hung in the black above the dead nebula. They looked, from far away, like a string of pearls on a god's neck. From close up, they looked like 42 cages full of frightened heirs. The Hearthcoal sat at the back of the line. Yura Valen sat alone in its cockpit. Her hands were steady. Her stomach was not. 11 days had passed since the fire. 11 days of welding, wiring, weeping, laughing, and more coffee than any one princess should drink. The ship that had risen from the ashes was rougher than before. The hull had patches. The wing on the left side did not match the wing on the right. The paint of the name, Hearthcoal, had been redone in slightly crooked letters because Yura's hand had been shaking the day she repainted it. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. A voice came through her calm, steady, familiar. Hearthcoal, this is the Blue Hen. Read me. Loud and clear, Daniel. Good. Breathe. 3 deep ones. Slow. She breathed 3 deep ones. Slow. Now you remember what I told you, Daniel said. Do not race the others. Race the nebula. The dust is the enemy, not them. I remember. And Yura? Yes. Bring her home. The race horn blared across 42 cockpits. The fleet launched. The dead nebula was the corpse of an old star. It had died 1,000,000 years ago, and its ashes had drifted out across 3 star systems in long red and gold rivers of dust. Inside it were dead ships from a war no one remembered. Old mines. Wrecked stations. Stones the size of moons. Heirs who flew through it were expected to be smart, fast, and very lucky. Yura was not in the lead. She was last by the 2nd checkpoint. The Hearthcoal was strong, but it was not as fast as the ships built by court engineers. Lord Varen's ship, a sleek silver thing called the Red Lance, sat in first place. He had paid the royal engineer a fortune. It showed. But Yura knew the dust. She had studied old charts that nobles never read. She slipped into a thin gas current that no one else trusted and let it carry her past 3 other ships. By checkpoint 4 she was 10th. By checkpoint 6 she was 6th. Then the mine started. Someone, long ago, had seeded this section of the nebula with sleeping mines. They woke up when a big enough engine passed near them. The 3rd leg of the race ran straight through the worst of them. The first ship exploded 10 seconds in. The second a minute later. A third was clipped on the wing and spun off into the dark. 3 heirs dead. 2 more turned back. Yura's hands tightened on the controls. Sweat ran down her temple. Then she saw, on her screen, a small pod ejected from one of the broken ships. A survival capsule. The heir of a small minor house, a young prince barely 17 years old. His pod was drifting toward an active mine. Just ahead of her, Lord Varen's red lance flew over the pod. He saw it. The red lance had clear scanners. He saw it, and he did not slow down. He did not even change course. He kept his lead. Yura felt something cold and sharp wake up inside her chest. She broke formation. Yura, what are you doing? Daniel's voice cracked through the calm. He left the boy. Yura, you will lose the race. He left the boy, Daniel. A pause. Then go get the boy. She turned the hearth coal hard. She matched the pod's drift. She used a magnetic claw to pull the capsule into her cargo hold. She lost 3 positions doing it. The cold, sharp thing in her chest did not care. Far away, in the blue hen, Daniel watched the long-range broadcast. He spoke without thinking. Into an open channel. That, he said quietly, is the woman I work for. His voice carried over the Empire's news broadcast. Every screen on Halmira, every public square, every market, every palace heard him say it. The race went on. By the final stretch, Yura had clawed her way back to 4th. The red lance was still in 1st. Varen flew like a man who had already won. He glanced at his rear scanner once. He saw the hearth coal closing on him. He turned his ship hard and clipped her wing. It was deliberate. The cameras saw it. The Empire saw it. The hearth coal spun. Yura's head slammed against the seat. Stars and red dust whirled across her windows. Ahead of her, a black asteroid grew larger by the second. Daniel, she said. I see it. I cannot pull out. You can. Listen to me. Full reverse burn. Hard left yell. Ride the asteroid's gravity like a slingshot. I used it once in a Martian dust storm. It works. It is too tight. It works. Do it now. Trust me. She did it. She fired the reverse burn. She yanked the yoke hard left. The hearth coal screamed. The asteroid filled her windows. For one long second she thought she was going to die. Then the gravity caught her. The ship swung around the rock like a stone in a sling. The hearth coal shot out of the curve at 3 times her old speed. She passed the red lance from below. She left Varen spinning in her backwash, his engine choking on her exhaust. She crossed the finish line 3rd. 3rd was enough. By Solari law, any heir who finished the trial of worlds alive, and who saved another royal during the race, earned the right to challenge for the throne by public vote. In the blue hen, Daniel laughed once, low and surprised, and put his forehead on the console. In the hearth coal, Yura opened her cargo hold and pulled a frightened young prince out of his pod. He looked at her with wide, wet eyes. She smiled, tired and proud, and ruffled his hair like an older sister. Welcome aboard, she said. The Empire was already changing. It just did not know it yet. News moves faster than ships. By the time the hearth coal docked back on Halmira, every market, every tavern, every kitchen across the Solari Empire had already replayed the broadcast 100 times. They had seen the fat princess fly. They had seen her save a boy. They had seen Lord Varen turn his ship away from a child and try to kill his own cousin on live cameras. A crowd gathered outside the docking bay. Yura stepped out of her ship in greasy engineer's coveralls, her hair tangled, her face streaked with sweat. She had not slept in 2 days. She looked like a mechanic who had just finished a hard shift. The crowd was silent for a long heartbeat. Then it roared. Not the polite cheer of trained palace servants. A real, raw, full-throated roar. Mothers held up their children to see her. Old men cried openly. Someone threw flowers. Someone else, a young woman with the same soft round shape as Yura, pushed through the front of the crowd and pressed her hand against her own heart and could not speak. Yura looked at her. Yura looked at all of them. She lifted one greasy hand in a small wave. The crowd roared louder. Inside the palace, it was a different kind of chaos. The public vote was called by old law. By tradition, the Council of Nobles tried to stop it. Captain Risha, calmly and without permission, walked into the main palace broadcast room and uploaded every piece of evidence she had gathered. The melted charge, the servant trail, the bank transfers from Lord Varen's private accounts. The Empire saw it all by lunchtime. Varen was arrested before dinner. He shouted. He threatened. He named names that no longer cared. They let him out in plain restraints. The vote went out 3 days later. Yura won by a margin nobody in court had predicted. Not a thin victory. A landslide. The Empire's people, the ones who had never been asked anything before, voted in numbers the palace had never seen. The coronation was held the next week. Yura stood at the great altar of the throne room in plain dark coveralls. Over her shoulders, she wore the ceremonial cloak of the Solari emperors, gold and red and very old. Underneath, she wore exactly what she had worn in her hangar for 2 years. Her hair was loose. Her hands were clean for once. Her hands were also shaking. She did not read from a prepared speech. The chamberlain had written one. She had folded it and left it on a workbench. She looked at the crowd. She breathed. My empire spent my whole life telling me I was the wrong shape for a crown, she said. Her voice was quiet at first, but it carried. I stopped listening the day a human mechanic told me that engines are judged by how they run, not by how they shine. People are not so different from engines. From this day forward, the Solari Empire will judge its citizens the same way. The hall was silent. Then it filled with sound. Not the trained cheer of nobles. The same raw roar from the docking bay, multiplied 1,000 times, echoing off the high gold ceilings. She was crowned Empress Yura I. That night, when the music had quieted and the drinks had emptied and the long official speeches were finally done, Yura slipped away from the celebration. She walked the long, quiet halls of the palace in her coronation cloak and her dirty coveralls, past gold statues and bowing guards, until she reached the small private hangar at the far edge of the western wing. The Blue Hen was there. Engines warm. Hatch open. Daniel Ward stood beside it, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. He had washed his face. His arm was still wrapped in white cloth. He was leaving. He had known he would. He had not told her. She knew it anyway. She stopped a few steps from him. She did not order him to stay. Empresses, she had decided in the last hour, would never again order people to stay. Daniel. Empress. Do not call me that. He smiled a small tired smile. Yura. Better. She looked at the Blue Hen. She looked at him. I am not asking you to be a consort, she said. I am not asking you to be a prince. I would not do that to you. You hate royal contracts. I do. I am asking you something else. All right. She took one step closer. Just one. I need the man who taught me that being stubborn is enough. I need to rebuild this empire the way we rebuilt the Hearthcoal. Piece by piece. With our own hands. I cannot do it alone. I do not want to do it alone. He looked at her for a long time. He looked at his ship. He thought about the Draven freighter captain, who had probably found another mechanic by now. He thought about the long, quiet runs of the Outer Rim, where broken things waited to be fixed. He thought about the woman in front of him, with her tired eyes and her crooked crown and her grease under her fingernails, who had flown through a dead nebula to save a frightened boy because no one else would. He shut the Blue Hen's hatch. I will need a bigger workshop, he said. Yura laughed. Full. Loud. Unashamed. The sound echoed down the long corridor of the palace she now ruled, and the guards along the wall pretended not to smile. Years later, when scholars wrote the history of the Solari Empire, they would mark this night as the start of what they called the Long Reform. Lord Varen would die in exile, forgotten. Captain Risha would build a new imperial guard that took its first oath not to the crown, but to the people. The boy Yura had saved would grow up to be one of her closest advisors. The minor houses would rise. The cruel old laws about appearance and bloodline would fall, one by one, like loose bolts on an old machine. And somewhere in a market on Halmira, a few nights after the coronation, an old noble would whisper the old nickname out of habit. The servant beside him would gently shake her head. That is not the fat princess, she would say. That is the empress who built her own world. And the old noble, slowly, would nod. He would never use the old name again. The end. The mirror in the dressing room was too tall and too honest. Princess Yura Valen stood in front of it with her arms held out to the sides, while 3 stylists pulled and pinned a silver gown around her body. The fabric was beautiful. It was also 2 sizes too small. Every time Yura breathed, the seams pulled at her ribs like angry fingers. Hold still, Your Highness, the head stylist said. Her voice was flat. She had said the same words 100 times tonight already. Yura held still. She was good at that. She had been holding still her whole life. Outside the tall windows, the floating capital city of Halmira glowed in the night sky. Thousands of ships were docking for the Centennial Gala. Every noble house in the sector had sent its best. The lights from their engines made the clouds look like spilled stars. It should have been a beautiful sight. To Yura, it just looked like 1,000 pairs of eyes coming to stare at her. A door opened behind her. Yura saw the reflection before she heard the voice. "Cousin," Lord Varant said. He walked in without asking. He always did. Stunning, as ever. He was tall, slim, and dressed in deep red. His smile was the smile of a man who had practiced it in front of his own mirror for hours. He held out a cup of crystal wine. Yura did not take it. "The gala has not started," she said quietly. "Then I am early." Varen looked at her gown and made a small humming sound. Such a brave choice of dress. Truly, not every woman could wear it. The stylist pretended not to hear. Yura felt her face grow warm. "Thank you," she said. Her voice did not shake. She was proud of that. Varen stepped closer. He spoke softer now, but not soft enough. Two stylists could still hear, and that was the point. "You know, dear cousin, I have been thinking. The throne is heavy. It needs a princess who, well, fits it. We must think of the people." He smiled again and walked out before she could answer. The stylists pulled the gown tighter. Yura looked back at the mirror. The woman who looked back had violet eyes, soft round cheeks, and royal markings shining on her temples. She looked tired. She did not look like a princess. She looked like a target. Hours later, the gala filled the great hall. Music played. Drinks flowed. Nobles laughed in small circles, and every laugh seemed to follow Yura across the marble floor. She heard the words. She always heard the words. Fat princess. Round royal. The shape of a moon, not a crown. They thought they were quiet. They were not. Yura kept her head up. She greeted ambassadors. She thanked old generals. She smiled at children who stared at her too long. When her father, the emperor, called her aside near a tall window, she felt almost grateful. "Yura," he said. He was old now. His voice carried no anger, only a sort of slow sadness that hurt worse than anger ever could. "My child, perhaps it is time. Time, father, to step aside from the succession. Let your cousin take the trials. You are gifted in many things, but the people, they want a certain kind of heir. You know this." Yura looked at her father's hands. They were old and shaking. She loved him very much. She nodded once, slowly, because nodding hurt less than speaking. She did not say yes. She did not say no. She walked away. Yura did not return to her chambers. She did not return to the gala. She walked through the long, quiet halls of the palace, past the gold statues and the bowing guards, until she reached the small private hangar at the far edge of the western wing. Only she had the key code. Only she knew what was inside. The door slid open. The lights came on one by one. A ship sat in the middle of the hangar. Half-built. Wires hanging. Plates removed. It was small, sharp, beautiful in the way only half-finished things can be. Yura had named it nothing yet. She had been building it for 2 years in secret. She kicked off her royal slippers. She pulled the silver gown over her head and threw it on a workbench. Underneath, she wore a thin, dark engineer's suit that she kept hidden for nights exactly like this. She tied back her long, pale hair. She picked up a magnetic spanner. Her hands were already black from old grease that no soap had ever fully washed away. She climbed under the ship and began to work. For a long time, she did not cry. She tightened bolts. She checked the krellite coil she had bought from a scrap dealer last month. She muttered numbers to herself. Then, somewhere between one bolt and the next, the tears came anyway. They dripped down her cheeks and onto the metal floor. She did not stop working. She thought of Varen's smile. She thought of her father's tired eyes. She thought of every laugh she had swallowed for 10 years. She wiped her face with the back of a greasy hand. She sat up. "The trial of worlds," she said out loud. The words echoed in the empty hangar. The trial was an old race. Heirs flew across the dead nebula alone in ships they built themselves. It was dangerous. People died in it. The winner earned the right to be emperor. Nobody expected the fat princess to enter. Yura looked at her half-built ship. She needed an engineer. A real one. Not a court flatterer. Someone who did not know her face. She would have to leave the palace tonight.